A child on Tatooine swept floors, repaired engines, and raced pods through canyon walls at speeds that should have killed him, and no Jedi in the galaxy knew he existed. The Force has never worked like a light switch. Microscopic organisms called midi-chlorians live inside every cell of every living thing, forming the bridge between ordinary life and the energy field that binds the galaxy together. Some beings never feel the Force at all, and that child was believed to have been conceived through the midi-chlorians for a single cosmic purpose. The distance between those two extremes is a spectrum never formally named, but drawn clearly enough through every era, and each point on it tells a different story about power, potential, and what happens when the two do not align. The Force flows through every living being in the Star Wars galaxy, but the vast majority never know it, and they never need to. Beings who never sense the Force consciously and never develop any abilities connected to it make up the galactic baseline. That child on Tatooine carried the highest midi-chlorian count ever recorded, over 20,000, and spent 9 years among them, indistinguishable from anyone else until a Jedi Master walked into his mother's home. But being unable to feel the Force does not mean being separate from it. Even the most ordinary being contributes their life energy to the living Force, the raw vitality that flows from every plant, animal, and person simply by being alive. The living Force does not limit itself to those who sense it. It works through the choices and sacrifices of ordinary beings just as powerfully as through the lightsaber of a trained Jedi. The Force works through non-sensitive beings in ways that shape the entire galaxy. Bail Organa never felt the Force, but when the Republic fell, he carried an infant Leia out of the chaos, hid her from the Empire, raised her as his own daughter, and spent the next 19 years helping build the Rebel Alliance from inside the Imperial Senate. Padme Amidala shaped galactic destiny through political action and personal sacrifice, and the Republic she fought to preserve became the ground on which every Force-sensitive conflict of her era played out. Han Solo may be the strongest case. The man who navigated the Kessel Run, dodged an asteroid field, and arrived at Yavin at the exact moment he was needed did not need hidden powers to matter, and did not believe in the Force at all. Every one of them moved through the galaxy without sensing the Force consciously, and every one of them changed the course of galactic history. Without Han's return at Yavin, Luke never takes the shot, and the moment that destroyed the Death Star may belong to a man who never believed in the Force at all. What separated them from those who could consciously sense the Force was never importance, it was awareness, and the Force gave them purpose without ever asking them to recognize it. But scattered across the galaxy, certain beings carry instincts so sharp that no amount of experience alone can explain where they come from. Some beings carry a Force connection just below the surface, strong enough to bend the odds in ways no logic can explain. These individuals show signs of intuition, luck, or instinct that go beyond what ordinary experience can account for, but they fall below the point where any Force tradition would identify them as candidates for training. They do not use the Force in any conscious way, and they cannot move objects, influence thoughts, or see visions. What they can do is respond to the Force's whisper without ever knowing it exists, making decisions that feel instinctive and surviving situations that no ordinary person would walk away from. Force sensibility is not a yes or no condition. Jedi Seekers identified Force-sensitive beings as infants and brought them to Jedi temples, but the boundary between those who were chosen and those who were passed over was never a clean line. Anakin's recruitment at age 9 over the Council's objections showed how fluid that boundary could be, though the Council's concern was not borderline sensitivity, but his age, his fear, and his anger. Chirrut Îmwe from Rogue One carries a connection to the Force that resists easy classification. He is not a Jedi and wields no Force abilities, but his devotion to the Force runs deep enough to carry him through a field of blaster fire on Scarif when every calculation says he should die. Whether his survival comes from faith, discipline, or something the Force itself provided has never been answered, and that ambiguity is the point. Chirrut suggests that devotion can reach places biology alone never will. Sabine Wren in the Ahsoka series pushes from the opposite direction. Huyang, the ancient Jedi droid, noted he had never encountered anyone with as little natural Force ability, yet Ahsoka agrees to train her and over time, Sabine manages to move objects with the Force, weakly but deliberately. What Chirrut achieved through faith and what Sabine produced through sheer will both suggest that the boundary between sensitive and non-sensitive is less rigid than the Jedi ever acknowledged. For most, that whisper stays quiet for a lifetime, but for some, it grows loud enough that entire institutions take notice. Level 3 is where the Force stops being a private gift and becomes something powerful enough to be hunted. These are beings whose Force sensitivity is unmistakable, but who have not yet received formal training in any Force tradition. The Jedi kept records of Force-sensitive children across the galaxy, and in the Clone Wars, Sidious sent bounty hunters to seize them for his own purposes. After Order 66, the Empire hunted them through the Inquisitorius under Vader's command. The difference is trainability, because with instruction, these beings can learn to move objects with the Force, heighten their physical performance, and develop enhanced perception. But without it, their abilities remain raw, inconsistent, and often frightening. Latent Force sensitives experience the Force more directly than those who only sense it as instinct. Ezra senses danger before it arrives. Leia feels Luke's distress across vast distances, and young Anakin reacts to events faster than any human should. Places saturated with the Force, from the dark side cave on Dagobah to the ancient temple on Malachor, carry a presence that sensitives respond to in ways most others never will. Before Ezra Bridger ever met the crew of the Ghost, every instinct he relied on came from the Force, even though he had no name for what he felt. Untrained, living as a street thief on Lothal, his sensitivity showed through instinct, sensing danger, unusual agility, strong responses to Jedi artifacts. His rapid development under Kanan Jarrus revealed substantial potential waiting to be activated. Young Anakin Skywalker on Tatooine, before Qui-Gon finds him, carried raw sensitivity on a completely different scale, with a midi-chlorian count far beyond anything recorded, and his pod racing abilities represent the extreme upper end of what raw connection can produce without formal training. The distance between that raw gift and what it could become is one of the Force's deepest tensions. Grogu defies every clean boundary between untrained and trained. A member of Yoda's species, roughly 50 years old but developmentally still an infant, Grogu received early training at the Jedi Temple before being hidden after Order 66. Despite having no completed instruction, he performs abilities that normally require sustained formal training, including moving objects with the Force and healing wounds through touch. The power is already there, raw and enormous. What takes centuries to develop is the judgment to direct it. Grogu heals Greef Karga on screen during The Mandalorian, and while his prior training means someone may have introduced him to the basics, the healing appears instinctive. In Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine tells Anakin that preserving life was the dark side's greatest pursuit, something only achievable through domination. Grogu's healing complicates that pitch, because his gift arrives through compassion rather than control, but he is not pure or uncomplicated. His Force grip on Cara Dune during a friendly arm wrestling match, triggered by the mistaken belief that Din Djarin was being harmed, was a genuine flash of something darker, and it ended only because the impulse burned out before it could take hold. For a being who could live 9 centuries, every pull towards darkness he resists now becomes the foundation for hundreds of years of choices still ahead of him. In a galaxy of trillions, the Force sensitives who live without training likely outnumber those ever recruited by any tradition. They move through the galaxy with sharper reflexes, strong gut feelings, and vivid dreams, never knowing that what they experience has a name. Some may have sensed something calling to them without ever learning what it was, while others carried abilities they mistook for luck or coincidence. For every Jedi who stood in a temple, there were thousands who never heard the call, and the Force flowed through them all the same. The raw ability inside these beings waited for one thing, and across galactic history, that one thing has always been training. Training is what transforms Force sensitivity into Force ability, and at this level, the Force begins to show what it values. Formal training in a Force tradition turns raw potential into reliable, repeatable skill. In Jedi terms, that means Padawans and Knights, and in Sith terms, apprentices and acolytes who have mastered core techniques. Training intensity and spiritual alignment shape effective ability as much as raw potential. Trained Force wielders can move objects with the Force, enhance their physical abilities for combat, sense the emotions and intentions of others, deflect blaster bolts by feeling attacks before they arrive, and detect disturbances at local or planetary range. The Legends reference work The Jedi Path lays out 3 core disciplines: control of one's own body and mind, sense of the Force externally, and alter using the Force to affect the outside world. The Jedi and the Sith shape their practitioners in opposite directions using the same energy. The Jedi taught practitioners to serve the Force's will, to fight defensively, to seek harmony and release attachment. The Sith taught theirs to dominate the Force, to channel anger and fear into raw power. Different traditions can train Force-sensitive beings to express Force abilities through very different philosophies and methods, and the results carry completely different costs and weak points. The Jedi and the Sith were not the only traditions that shaped Force wielders, and the Nightsisters of Dathomir and other groups prove that the Force does not care which institution trains its wielders, only how deep the connection runs. Kanan Jarrus is one of the clearest examples of how far a Force wielder can fall and climb back. A trained Jedi who survived Order 66 as a Padawan, Kanan buried his lightsaber, hid his identity, and cut himself off from the Force for years. When he began training Ezra, he had to rebuild his own connection alongside his students, relearning what it meant to trust the Force after everything it had failed to prevent. Even after losing his sight to Maul on Malachor, he fought his way back to a deeper connection than he had ever held before, one built not on what he could see, but on what he could feel. His final act on Lothal, holding back an explosion long enough for the people he loved to escape, showed that the Force does not close the door on anyone willing to walk back through it. The man who spent years running from what he was died as something greater than what the Jedi Order had ever asked him to become. Ezra and the world between worlds defy everything the 7 levels predict. In the 4th season of Rebels, Ezra accesses a plane of the Force that connects all of time and space, where doorways open onto different moments in galactic history. He reaches through time and pulls Ahsoka out of her duel with Vader, saving her life across the boundary of past and present. This is a trained but still developing Force wielder accessing something that the Emperor, at the height of his power, sought but could not reach. Ezra found the key first and kept it from him. Ezra reached a place that Sidious spent years trying to reach, and the difference lay in the relationship each had with the Force rather than raw ability alone. The Force granted Ezra what it denied Sidious, and the reason had nothing to do with power. Level 5 is where the Force stops being a tool and starts becoming a conversation. At this depth, Force wielders have moved beyond competence into exceptional mastery. In Jedi terms, these are Jedi Masters and Council members. Among those who follow the darker path, these are fully realized lords who've surpassed their training. Experience, wisdom, and depth of understanding matter here as much as raw biological potential. Exceptional Force wielders do not simply use the Force with more strength. They understand it, and their relationship has matured beyond technique into something closer to dialogue. They sense disturbances across vast distances and employ abilities requiring subtlety as much as power. And at this depth, they also feel the Force's 2 dimensions: the living Force, the raw vitality of the present moment, and the cosmic Force, which governs destiny, prophecy, and the long arc of galactic events. The costs of light side and dark side mastery becomes visible at level 5. Both approaches produce devastating ability, but they exact different prices. The light side can drift into detachment, leaving a master too removed from the living world to protect it effectively. And the Jedi Council's inability to sense Palpatine operating at the heart of the Republic is that cost made visible. The darker path can burn its practitioners from the inside out, narrowing until there is no room left to turn back. Maul, discarded by his own master and left to survive on nothing but rage for a decade, is what the far end of that road looks like. Obi-Wan Kenobi in his prime, during the Clone Wars, and at the time of the Mustafar duel, stands among the most effective Jedi of the Republic age. Not the most powerful of his era, but his defensive fighting style, his patience under pressure, and his deep connection to the Force made him one of the most formidable. The trauma of Order 66 weakened that connection, And during the years that followed on Tatooine, Obi-Wan struggled to call on abilities that once came naturally, reaching for the Force and finding silence where there had once been a current. His recovery, driven by encounters with young Leia and the recognition that there were still lives depending on him, showed that mastery can be rebuilt when the practitioner finds a reason to reconnect. Ahsoka Tano earned her mastery outside every institution the Jedi ever built. She left the Order during the Clone Wars, not because her connection to the Force weakened, but because the system around it no longer deserved her trust. On her own, she fought Maul to a standstill during the Siege of Mandalore, confronted Vader in the ruins of the Sith Temple on Malachor, and survived both encounters through a depth of skill and instinct that no council rank had ever validated. Her growth from a raw Padawan into a warrior capable of facing the galaxy's most dangerous Force wielders traces a path the Jedi never designed and never sanctioned. By the time of the Ahsoka series and The Mandalorian, decades of independent growth have only deepened her connection. She carries the weight of everything the Republic-era Jedi failed to protect, and she trains others not as a Jedi Master, but as someone who understands what the Order got wrong. Ahsoka proves that mastery does not require the institution that claimed ownership of it, and that a Force wielder who walks away from the Jedi can still reach depths the Council reserved for its own. The duel on Mustafar defined everything that followed. Two men who had fought side by side across an entire war now turn the full weight of that bond against each other. Anakin has far greater stated potential, and his willingness to draw on the dark side gives him access to power reserves Obi-Wan does not possess. Yet Obi-Wan wins, not through superior Force power, but through emotional discipline, intimate knowledge of Anakin, and the patience to fight a defensive war until his opponent's own flaws bring him down. Every advantage Anakin held in raw strength, Obi-Wan answered with composure and precision. Obi-Wan held the higher ground and told him not to attack, but Anakin, unable to accept that position and patience could matter more than raw strength, leapt and was left broken beyond repair. That moment echoed through every generation that followed. Vader, after Mustafar, carried the Chosen One's potential trapped inside a body that could no longer hold it. He was rebuilt with machines and life support, and the injuries permanently diminished him, leaving Vader far below what the Chosen One was born to reach. The Vader comics and Rogue One portray a being of terrifying power, and nothing about those feats looks like diminishment. But the suit that sustained him also contained him, and the body meant to channel the full power of the Force could no longer do so without mechanical aid. Vader was more powerful than any Inquisitor and more powerful than most Jedi who ever lived, but he was permanently incomplete, and the distance between what he was born to be and what he became is one of the Force's deepest tragedies. Qui-Gon Jinn, though never seated on the Council, achieved a form of mastery whose greatest contribution reaches far beyond combat. His deep connection to the living Force led him to discover the path to consciousness after death, a dimension of mastery built on surrender rather than control. That willingness to release oneself to the cosmic Force while keeping enough presence to reach back to the living is what allowed Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin to persist beyond their final moments. No practitioner of the darker path has walked that same road in the cited canon, and that tells more about the nature of the Force than any midi-chlorian count ever could. True mastery makes the Force a conversation, but only a handful of beings across galactic history ever push past that threshold. Only a handful of beings across galactic history have reached this depth, and that rarity reveals how different this level truly is. The most powerful Force wielders the galaxy has seen carry a connection so deep and refined that they operate on a completely different plane from even accomplished masters. In Jedi terms, these are Grandmasters, and among those who walk the darker path, these are the reigning lords at their absolute peak. Counting midi-chlorians is no longer enough to explain the difference here, because what creates this kind of power is not raw strength alone, but the depth and scope of awareness that comes with it. Force wielders at this level do not simply use Force techniques with greater strength. They feel the Force as a living whole, sensing its currents, its will, and its disruptions with a clarity that borders on complete awareness. At this depth, the cosmic force becomes something felt directly rather than glimpsed in rare visions. Galactic history extends far beyond the eras covered here, and the Old Republic alone produced beings whose power would test any framework. Yoda is the definitive example of this depth on the light side. Across nearly 9 centuries of life, Yoda's connection with the Force surpassed nearly every Jedi who lived, built through study, practice, meditation, and alignment sustained longer than most civilizations endure. His ability to sense the catastrophe of Order 66, the loss of Jedi across the galaxy, and his immediate understanding that the corrupting influence had taken full control reflects awareness operating at the scale of entire civilizations. The Season 6 arc of the Clone Wars follows Yoda as he communes with the Force priestesses at the wellspring of life, and even after centuries of practice, he is not fully open to every mastery. That arc captures a master still learning, still deepening, still reaching. Sidious represents the dark side mirror of that same depth. For decades, he operated in secret at the center of galactic power, suppressing his presence from the entire Jedi Council while engineering a war that served as the instrument of his rise. He achieved what no Sith Lord before him had managed: complete galactic domination, sustained for over 2 decades. Yoda sensed the effects and acknowledged that the Jedi's vision was being obscured, but he could not penetrate or remove the veil Sidious had placed over the Force itself. Sidious himself claimed knowledge of a Sith Lord who could manipulate midi-chlorians to create life and prevent death, and whether that power was real or merely a lure designed for Anakin, the ambition behind it reflects everything the dark side builds toward at this depth. Not harmony with the Force, but domination over its most fundamental processes. Combat at this depth is something else altogether. The duel between Yoda and Sidious in the Senate chamber put 2 beings at their peak against each other, and the environment responded. Senate pods flying, energy cracking through the air, the chamber itself torn apart by what they unleashed. Neither could overcome the other, and the confrontation ended without a clear victor. Every surface became a weapon, every current in the Force a blade, and the political heart of the Republic was reshaped by what 2 individuals could summon. This was not mastery amplified, but a different kind of confrontation entirely, where the Force itself becomes a participant. Mace Windu occupies the boundary between mastery and transcendence. His fighting style of Apad, rooted in legends and reference material, channels the user's inner darkness and the opponent's aggressive energy back against them, giving him a unique tactical edge against dark side opponents. His confrontation with Sidious in Revenge of the Sith brought the most powerful Sith Lord alive to the brink of defeat, something Yoda himself could not accomplish in the Senate chamber. That single moment places Apad among the most dangerous disciplines the Force has ever produced, but it requires walking the edge of darkness to work, and the Force does not reward edges held forever. Every being at this level earned mastery through dedication, but the Force had already chosen someone for a purpose none of them could fulfill. Only one being was chosen by the Force itself, and his story carries the greatest promise and deepest tragedy the Force has ever produced. Level 7 belongs to a single individual, Anakin Skywalker. In The Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan reports Anakin's midi-chlorian count as over 20,000, higher than Master Yoda's. Qui-Gon suspects Anakin's origin may be connected to the midi-chlorians, and some Jedi believe he may be the Chosen One, a living concentration of the Force born for a purpose no other being shares. Level 7 does not represent more of the same abilities available at Level 6, but a completely different relationship with the Force. The Chosen One is not merely the most powerful Force user, but the instrument through which the Force itself achieves balance. Yoda and Sidious achieve their mastery through training, intelligence, and will. Anakin is a being whose very existence was shaped by the Force for a specific cosmic purpose. His potential is not earned, but given, and it comes with a burden no other Force wielder shares: the weight of destiny. The cosmic Force does not just speak to the Chosen One, it moves through him. The Mortis trilogy in the Clone Wars offers the most direct look at what the Chosen One was meant to be. On Mortis, Anakin encounters the father, the daughter, and the son, powerful Force wielders associated with balance, light, and dark. Anakin subdues both the son and the daughter at the same time, something neither of the other Mortis beings can do alone, and the father recognizes him as the one meant to replace him as the keeper of balance between both sides. Anakin on Mortis is not a conventional warrior, but a living balance point, holding both sides in equilibrium through sheer depth of connection. The father looked at Anakin and saw something that centuries of his own guardianship had never produced, a being who could hold light and dark in equal measure without being consumed by either. The tragedy of the Chosen One is that Anakin possesses more raw force potential than any being in galactic history and never fully realizes it. During the Clone Wars, he grows into one of the most formidable Jedi Knights in the Order, leading troops with instincts that seem to predict the future and fighting with an intensity few Jedi of his generation can match. But the war also deepens every crack the Council warned about. The same intensity that makes him a devastating warrior makes him vulnerable to the very forces that will consume him. His attachments, his fear, and his fall on Mustafar all prevent him from becoming what the prophecy described. The Chosen One was not meant to be the greatest warrior, but the keeper of balance, and the keeper broke. Anakin's destiny is fulfilled in Return of the Jedi. He ends Sidious to save Luke, and in that moment, the potential that was corrupted and buried for decades finally surfaces in its intended form. The fact that the Force waited 23 years for this moment through everything Vader destroyed as its Chosen One says something about the cost of balance that no framework can measure. The father who lost everything found the one thing the Force had always meant for him to protect. Luke Skywalker carried his father's lineage but forged a completely different path. As the biological son of the Chosen One, he receives only basic training from Obi-Wan and incomplete training from Yoda, never finishes a formal Jedi education, and still confronts Vader and the Emperor while resisting the dark side under extreme pressure. His compassion, not his combat skill, triggers his father's redemption. The Last Jedi finds him in exile on Ahch-To, cut off from the Force by his own choice, living for years without drawing on it even though he remained Force sensitive. His eventual reconnection reveals that even the son of the Chosen One can walk away from the Force, and the Force will wait for him to come back. The Bendu and Rebels exist between light and dark, old enough to watch civilizations rise and fall, and his presence suggests that 7 levels may describe only the mortal dimension of a Force far larger than any framework can hold. Beyond level 7, the levels end, but the Force does not, and its deepest truth has always been about more than power. The chain that restores balance to the galaxy runs through a non-sensitive mother who raises the Chosen One, a skeptical pilot who arrives at the exact right moment, a trained knight who lays down his life, and the broken Chosen One who throws an emperor down a shaft to save his son. No link in that chain was less important than any other, and the Force was never a weapon. It was always a current moving through every living thing, never measuring how much any one being was worth to the galaxy. The full story stretches further than any single spectrum can show. Obi-Wan's path through every era of the Force's history reveals what patience and surrender look like across an entire lifetime, and the Sith's own 7 levels trace the cost of building that same connection on domination alone.